There's a strange comfort in predictability. In marriage, in routine, in the quiet rhythm of day-to-day life. I used to believe that. I built my world on it. Thursday evenings were usually low-key for me, maybe a drafting session at the office, maybe a bourbon and a replay of a Celtics game I missed. But that night, I was at the Avery Gallery downtown, sweating slightly in a jacket that felt too tailored for comfort. Joyce had asked me to attend a reception, something about a new contemporary installation and donor relations. I wasn't listening all that closely when she explained it. I rarely was when it came to her work. Don't get me wrong. I admire Joyce. At 42, she had a sharp eye for people, for opportunity, and a smile that could split boardrooms open. PR was her domain, press releases, gallery launches, cocktail chatter. She excelled at selling beauty in language and presence. Meanwhile, I was more brick and beam, the type of guy who thinks in right angles and blueprints. The reception was the kind of thing she loved, soft jazz looping in the background, walls lined with interpretive brushstrokes and statements I didn't fully understand. Everyone had a drink in their hand and a slightly bored look, like they were trying to decide whether the art or the hors d'oeuvres were more pretentious. I hovered, smiled when appropriate, nodded when someone name-dropped an artist. I wasn't a total stranger to the scene, just someone trying to be present. Joyce was in her element. She worked the room like a conductor, waving her champagne flute mid-conversation, brushing fingers lightly on elbows, introducing people like pieces in a puzzle she had already solved. Her laugh came easy, and her posture was effortlessly elegant. I watched her from a distance, wondering, not for the first time, how someone like me had ended up with someone like her. About 40 minutes in, she spotted me across the room and gave me that look, one brow slightly raised, lips curved knowingly. She walked over with a practiced urgency, her heels tapping softly against the polished floor. "Hey," she said, slightly breathless, "could you do me a favor?" "Of course." I left a folder in my car. "I think it's in the back seat, black, with the artist bios. For Harper." She motioned toward the gallery director standing near a piece that looked like someone's nightmare made of copper wire. "Would you mind grabbing it? I'm mid-convo with a collector and I can't slip out." "No problem," I said, already reaching for her keys. She smiled, quick, distracted, and slipped them into my hand. Then she turned and glided back into the crowd. It was a simple errand. Should have been nothing. Outside, the summer air clung to me. The lot wasn't far, just a level below in the adjoining parking garage. I found her car, a blue sedan we'd leased last spring. It was clean, almost impersonal, like she barely touched it beyond commuting. I opened the back door, spotted the folder right where she said it would be, and reached for it. Then I saw her purse on the front seat. It was unzipped. I didn't think, I acted. That's the honest truth. It wasn't suspicion, not really. Just a momentary lapse in boundaries, the same way you might scroll through a partner's playlist or peek at a to-do list. But the moment my hand touched the edge of that leather bag, I felt it, the line being crossed. Still, I kept going. Nestled beneath a cosmetic pouch was a paper sleeve. A hotel key card. I pulled it out, turning it over. It had the embossed logo of a high-end boutique hotel, the Vesper, in Boston. My chest tightened. Next to it, folded carefully, was a bar receipt. Dated 3 weeks ago. 2 cocktails, a shared dessert, room charge billed at midnight. My thumb brushed the ink and I saw her signature on the bottom, unmistakable. And then, folded inside the receipt like a secret tucked away in a novel, was a handwritten note. "Can't stop thinking about you. Last night was everything. Same time next trip." That's when it happened. The shift. It wasn't like in the movies, no dramatic music, no shattering glass. Just a quiet, dense stillness. My ears rang. My heartbeat, once steady, changed tempo like a metronome gone rogue. I stood there for a long minute, staring at that scrap of paper. Then I folded it back up, slid everything into place, and picked up the folder. I locked the car, checked my expression in the window's reflection, flat, composed, and walked back into the gallery. Inside, Joyce was laughing at something, her hand lightly resting on a tall man's forearm. When she saw me, she excused herself and met me halfway. "You're a lifesaver," she said, taking the folder with a grateful nod. No trace of guilt? No blush of shame. She didn't ask if I'd looked through anything. She didn't seem rattled. Maybe that's what shook me the most. That nothing in her demeanor hinted at secrets. Her gaze was steady. Her hands didn't tremble. She glanced at the folder like it was just another item in a list. I mumbled something, I don't even remember what, and drifted back toward the wall-length installation of storm photographs. From behind me, her laughter resumed, threaded into the gallery's ambient hum. That's the thing about a betrayal that starts in silence. It doesn't roar. It settles in quietly like a crack in drywall you don't notice until it's spread all the way across the room. By the end of the night, nothing had been said. Not a word about the keycard, the note, or the receipt. But something inside me had shifted irrevocably. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the faint glow of Joyce's reading lamp casting soft shadows against the drywall. She'd fallen asleep easily like she always did after gallery events, still in her robe, her face bare of makeup, lips parted slightly in sleep. I watched her for a while, not out of affection but out of confusion. How could someone rest so peacefully with secrets like that tucked inside them? I turned onto my side facing away. My thoughts were loud. At first, I tried to rationalize. Maybe the card meant nothing. Maybe the note was from an old friend, or a joke, or a misunderstanding. Maybe she picked up the key from someone else, maybe the receipt wasn't hers. But the truth lingered like smoke. Her signature was on it. That was her handwriting. The note wasn't typed, it was written with an asterisk Macy with intent. I got up around 3 a.m., made coffee I didn't drink, and sat in the kitchen staring at the backsplash tiles I installed myself last winter. Every detail of our home suddenly looked different, less like a shared space and more like a backdrop to a story I hadn't been told. The more I thought, the more things started to stack up. 2 months ago, Joyce changed the password on her phone. No explanation. I'd noticed it when we were driving and I offered to respond to a text for her. She took the phone from my hand gently, smiled, and said, "I got it." That was the first time I realized I didn't have access to her world anymore. Then there were the evenings she started calling networking nights. At first, they were occasional, sprinkled across the calendar like any normal job commitment. But they became more frequent, always last minute, always vague. When I'd ask who was attending, she'd rattle off a few names I didn't recognize and pivot to asking about my day. It worked. I let her change the subject. I wanted to believe her. More recently, she'd beg *and sleeping in the guest room, citing migraines or late-night work. The first time I was concerned. I brought her water, dimmed the lights, even rubbed her shoulders. The next week, it happened again. Then again. After that, she stopped offering reasons altogether. She simply carried her pillow across the hall and closed the door behind her. The * Macy between us, once subtle but dependable, had thinned out like a signal losing frequency. Her touch became mechanical. Her laugh didn't linger. Even the way she said good morning felt pre-recorded, like a button she pressed out of obligation. And then there was the perfume. Not the one I bought her 3 Christmases ago. This one was sharper, more assertive. I first noticed it when she came home late in a fitted navy dress I hadn't seen before, hair done up in a way that looked less like gallery formal and more like date night chic. I complimented her. She said nothing, just kissed my cheek absently and disappeared into the bathroom. A week later, I found the receipt in the laundry basket. Lingerie. 2 sets. One scarlet, one black lace. Both from a boutique uptown we'd never shopped at together. When I asked about them, she blinked once, then said it was for an upcoming photo shoot she was organizing. Product placement, she said with a small smile. You know, social campaigns. I nodded like I understood, but I didn't. Not really. It wasn't just the purchases, or the perfume, or the passwords. It was her detachment. The emotional vacuum. Like I was sharing a house with someone who had quietly removed herself from it while leaving her shadow behind to keep me company. At work, I started slipping. Drafts went unfinished. Emails went unanswered. I found myself staring at floor plans and wondering how many couples had secrets buried beneath their beautiful homes. Architecture had always been about symmetry and stability to me. Now it felt ironic, drawing lines and supports while my own foundation cracked quietly beneath me. On Wednesday of that week, I did something I never thought I'd do. I activated a location tracking app through the vehicle Joyce used for gallery business. It was tied to the company she consulted for basic GPS services for logistical reasons. I still had admin access from the time I helped them integrate the system last year. She never removed my credentials. I told myself I wouldn't check it often, just once or twice, to settle my own anxiety. But that first evening when she claimed to be at a networking event on the west side, her vehicle pinged in a residential zone downtown. An apartment complex I didn't recognize. I stared at the map for 10 solid minutes, refreshing it every 30 seconds. The car didn't move. It sat there from 6:47 p.m. until 10:22 p.m. Then it returned, slowly, toward our neighborhood. I didn't ask her anything that night. I just lay beside her in bed. She'd returned to our room for the first time in a week, listening to her steady breathing. Her hand was inches from mine, but she didn't reach for it. The next day, she left early for a breakfast meeting. I stayed behind and opened her laptop. Password protected. I checked the browser history on our shared home computer instead. Cleared. She was erasing her tracks. But in the gaps I found fragments, searches for boutique hotels in Denver even though her last trip was supposed to be in Seattle. A bookmarked page for a restaurant 2 states away. Nothing conclusive. Just smoke. I didn't bring any of it up. Not yet. Instead, I began to retreat inside myself, marking time by the hours she was gone and the hours I pretended I was fine. I functioned. I smiled at coworkers. I ate dinner. I replied to messages. But inside I was unraveling. I'd always believed betrayal would feel loud. Explosive. But it didn't. It was quiet. Isolating. Like trying to scream in a soundproof room. And now I was certain something was happening. She was meeting someone. Someone who sent notes in cursive and paid for hotel bars. Someone who knew the scent of her new perfume. And I had no idea what to do about it. Friday came fast. The week had blurred past me in a fog of second-guessing and half-hearted distractions. I went to work, met deadlines, answered calls, but all of it was mechanical. Every idle moment pulled my mind back to Joyce. To the scent of that new perfume. To the hotel key card. To the night her location had hovered for 4 straight hours in a place she never mentioned. That morning, over eggs and toast, she told me she had a dinner meeting. Vendor from Phoenix, she said, buttering a croissant. We're finalizing a sponsorship package. Shouldn't be too late? I nodded. Didn't ask questions. You okay? She asked, glancing at me over the rim of her coffee cup. Yeah, I replied. Didn't sleep much. She tilted her head, concerned. Or pretending to be. You should take melatonin. Or come to bed earlier. I'll try, I said. She smiled, kissed my cheek lightly, and headed for the door. She was wearing the black wrap dress I hadn't seen in a while, the one with a neckline that always made me look twice. Her heels clicked down the hall as if nothing in the world could touch her. That afternoon, I planned my own schedule around hers. I stayed at the office until 6, then grabbed a change of clothes from the gym locker and waited. At 6:45, I opened the GPS tracker app. The dot moved slowly downtown. She wasn't heading toward the gallery. At 7:15, the vehicle stopped in front of a restaurant on Franklin Avenue, La Veranda. Upscale Italian place. Candlelit booths. I knew it. We'd celebrated our 8th anniversary there. I drove past the entrance once, then parked 2 blocks away. It was nearly dark now, streetlights just beginning to flicker on. The air had that early summer warmth, the kind that usually made me want to slow down and breathe. But not tonight. I walked up the sidewalk, ducking under the windows of a florist shop and pausing across the street. La Veranda's big glass windows faced the avenue, framed in ivy and strung with soft lights. The interior glowed gold. Inside, I spotted her almost immediately, Joyce, seated at a corner table. She wasn't alone. He arrived 5 minutes later. Tall, late 30s or early 40s. Navy blazer, crisp white shirt, expensive-looking watch. He walked in like he'd done it before. Like he knew he'd be welcome. She stood to greet him. Not a handshake. Not a casual hug. A slow, familiar embrace. Her hands lingered on his arms. He bent to whisper something in her ear, and she laughed, quiet, in asterisk mate. Then they sat. The waiter arrived. 2 glasses of red. She ordered. He nodded. I watched from behind a tree, half-shadowed, far enough that they wouldn't see me but close enough to catch every gesture. They leaned in close. She touched his wrist. He rested his hand on her knee under the table. Then came the moment I'll never forget. Joyce reached for her left hand and slipped off her wedding ring. She set it next to his glass. No hesitation. No glance over her shoulder. My breath caught. My first instinct was to storm in, flip the table, demand answers. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone and hit record. I held it steady, capturing the smiles, the quiet murmurs, the absence of guilt on her face. 10 minutes later, I turned and walked back to my car. I didn't go home. Not right away. I drove aimlessly for an hour, trying to process what I'd seen. There it was. Proof. Not speculation. Not hints or circumstantial moments. I had watched her choose someone else. Not just in the physical sense, but emotionally. Deliberately. I went to a small diner on the edge of town. Ordered black coffee and a sandwich I didn't eat. My hands trembled when I reached for the napkin. My heart had gone strangely still. Not broken. Not shattered. Just finished. She didn't come home until after 11. I was on the couch, TV off, lights dimmed. She entered quietly, her heels in her hand, keys in the other. Hey, she whispered, slipping through the door like a teenager past curfew. Sorry, it ran long. I said nothing. You still up? Couldn't sleep? She didn't press. Just walked past, her silhouette briefly pausing before disappearing into the hallway. I stared at the dark screen in front of me, her laughter from the restaurant still echoing in my mind. The ring. That was the image I couldn't let go of. Her wedding ring, lying beside another man's drink like it meant nothing. Like the vows it symbolized were just an accessory she could take off at will. That night, I didn't sleep again. But I wasn't restless. I was resolved. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't we drifted apart or it's complicated. This was betrayal. Clear. Unforgivable. Undeniable. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birds and the smell of fresh coffee. Joyce was already dressed, her heels clicking faintly across the hardwood as she moved through the house like nothing had changed. She was humming an old jazz tune I couldn't name, but one I remembered she used to play while getting ready for big meetings. She poured a second cup, set it on the table across from mine, and smiled. "We've both been so busy," she said lightly, like we hadn't just passed each other in silence the night before. "Let's do something tonight. Just us." I stared at her. She sipped her coffee, her eyes calm and expectant. It stunned me, honestly, that she could still look me in the eye like that. That she could sip her drink, hum a tune, make plans with me while the ghost of her ring sat in another man's memory. I nodded once. Said nothing. She kissed me on the cheek, routine, mechanical, and grabbed her keys. "See you tonight," she said, and left. The door clicked shut behind her. I stared at the space she had occupied, then at the untouched coffee cup she left for me. It still had steam rising off the top. I stood, walked to the sink, and poured it out. Then I got to work. There are two types of breakups in this world, the ones where people scream and cry and throw things, and the ones where everything goes quiet. Mine was the latter. A still, calculating disassembly of a life. I moved through the day like a man packing up a crime scene, methodical, detached. First, the bank accounts. We shared 3, checking, savings, and a joint credit line. I closed the joint credit and transferred the balance to my personal card. I rerouted the automatic payments, utilities, mortgage, subscriptions. All reset under my name. Then the property records. When we bought the house 8 years ago, we listed it jointly. But last year, I refinanced it under my business. I had thought it was just a smart tax move. Now I saw it for what it was, an exit plan I hadn't realized I'd been drafting. I double-checked the paperwork. My name only. Next, the legal prep. I called Alan Cresswell, my friend from grad school who now handled domestic cases. I told him I wasn't ready to file, not yet, but I needed the framework. He didn't ask questions. Just said, "I'll send over the packet." By noon, I had the draft separation documents sitting in my inbox, templated and ready to go. I didn't confront her. Didn't yell. Didn't play the video. Not yet. Instead, I packed her things. I started with the obvious, her toiletries in the master bath, her shoes lined neatly by the closet wall, the half-used makeup bag she left on the counter every morning. I packed them carefully into 3 boxes. Then her clothes. The dresses. The scarves. The jewelry she thought I never noticed missing when she went on those business trips. Into the boxes they went. I left her laptop and work files untouched. Not because I didn't care, but because I wanted her to come face to face with the life she'd abandoned. I wanted her to have to dig through the remains herself. By 5 p.m., the house was quiet. I set the boxes by the front door. I didn't text her. I didn't call. At 6:47 p.m., she returned. The garage door hummed open. I sat in the living room with a single light on, sipping water from a chipped ceramic mug I made in college. It felt symbolic, somehow imperfect, but mine. She walked in, her smile faltering slightly when she saw me. "Hey," she said. "You're home early." I nodded. "What's with the boxes?" I didn't answer right away. I stood, walked to the projector I'd set up on the opposite wall, something she had gotten me for my birthday years ago, and clicked it on. A blank white screen filled the room. Then the video. The recording from La Veranda began to play. No sound. Just her. And him. The smiles. The wine. The arm around her. The moment she took off her ring. I didn't look at her. I watched her watch herself. She stood frozen in the entryway, one hand clutching her phone, the other limp at her side. Her breath caught. I heard it. Then finally, the video looped. It started again. She stepped forward slowly, her voice thin. "Ryan." But I was already walking toward the hallway. I didn't speak. I didn't pause. She followed, her footsteps quick. "Ryan, please, Io." I stopped by the staircase, turned, and handed her a letter. 1 page. Typed. It outlined her exit instructions, her personal belongings packed, her accounts closed, her email access revoked, the lawyer's contact information if she wanted to contest anything. Her eyes filled with tears. She opened her mouth again. "I'm not interested," I said quietly. She blinked. "I saw enough," I added. "I don't need an explanation. I don't want one." Her voice cracked. Can we talk, just No. Please, Ryanu. I'm not angry, I said. I'm not even surprised. I'm just done. There was nothing theatrical about it. No shouting. No names. Just the end. A quiet fall of the curtain. She stood there, trembling, shoulders curled slightly inward. And I walked upstairs. I closed the bedroom door, locked it not for security but for symbolism. It took her 20 minutes to leave. The projector was still running in the living room, looping the same muted betrayal over and over. When I came down later, she was gone. The boxes were still there. But she wasn't. I opened the front door, stepped outside into the evening air. The sky was pale, fading to soft blue. No stars yet. Just that deep, endless quiet. For the first time in months, I breathed in and didn't feel like I was drowning. Inside, her final note sat on the coffee table. A small, handwritten thing. 2 sentences. You didn't even ask why. I thought we mattered more than that. I didn't respond. She was wrong. We had mattered. But she had chosen something else. And I had chosen peace. I didn't stay in Greenfield long after Joyce left. Maybe 3 weeks. Enough time to finalize paperwork, shutter our shared accounts, notify the gallery she wouldn't be returning, not directly, of course. I simply forwarded the legal address where her belongings could be retrieved and made a polite note that she was taking personal leave. I never responded to her follow-ups. Not the initial "can we talk" email. Not the long apology she sent 2 days later, typed and carefully phrased. Not the messages that followed, some formal, others increasingly desperate, cycling between guilt and outrage. She went from "I know I messed up" to "you didn't even fight for us" in under a week. I ignored every single one. Silence became my shelter. My oxygen. The first act of real self-preservation I'd practiced in years. I packed up my life in measured pieces. Sold our bed frame. Gave away the living room furniture. I kept the desk I built myself and my father's old toolbox. Everything else? Gone. Then I left. No farewell tour. No announcements. Just a one-way drive west until I ran out of thoughts and landed in Tulsa. I didn't know anyone there. That was the point. It was a quiet city, wider skies, slower streets. A friend from college had once mentioned a furniture restoration shop downtown looking for steady hands. I called them from a gas station just over the border. They said I could start Monday. By Tuesday, I had a room above a bookstore and a folding cot that squeaked whenever I shifted my weight. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I started sleeping through the night for the first time in over a year. No dreams. No late-night check-ins. No worrying if her conference call was really a wine-soaked dinner at some rooftop bar. The tension that had lived in my chest like a permanent resident? Gone. Replaced by a kind of quiet sadness I could manage. Like mourning a version of yourself you'd grown out of without realizing it. At the shop, my days were simple. We worked with our hands, polishing oak, replacing joints, restoring antiques that other people had given up on. There was something poetic about that. Fixing what was broken, but never pretending it hadn't been. My boss, Hal, was in his 60s. Kind man. Didn't ask questions. You work like someone who's lost something, he said once while we lacquered a cherrywood dresser. I shrugged. I guess I did. He nodded like he understood more than he let on. I didn't tell anyone the full story. Just that I used to be an architect. That I needed a break from the noise. People didn't push. Tulsa, as it turned out, was a good place to disappear politely. In the evenings, I'd walk downtown. There was a small antiques shop nestled between a bakery and a barber. I visited often. Not for anything specific, just the comfort of old things that had stories but didn't speak. That's where I met Maggie. She was rearranging a set of teacups in the window the first time I walked in. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Auburn hair tied back. No makeup. Just calm eyes and a smudge of dust on her cheekbone she hadn't noticed. You like broken things? She asked without turning. I smiled. Only the ones worth fixing. That made her laugh, soft, a little sad. We talked for 20 minutes about Victorian armoires and the tragic architecture of 70s suburbs. She told me she grew up in St. Louis. Moved to Tulsa after her divorce to be near her sister. Said the city made more sense when your life didn't. It wasn't a spark. It was a warmth. No games. No performance. Just a quiet understanding between two people who weren't trying to be anyone else. I didn't tell her about Joyce, not then. But I think she sensed something. Some people carry their pasts like old coats. Even when they take them off, the shape stays. Over the next few weeks, we saw each other often. Sometimes by design, sometimes by accident. She'd offer coffee when I stopped by the shop. I'd bring her pastries from the bakery next door. Once, she mentioned she had a record player with a broken hinge. I offered to take a look. I fixed it the next day. Left it on her counter with a note, now it spins again. Kind of like us. She didn't reply. The next time I visited, Billie Holiday was playing softly in the background. That was the first time I felt something close to okay. The letters from Joyce kept coming. She found my forwarding address through a mutual friend. The envelopes came twice a month, long-winded reflections, half apologies wrapped in poetic guilt. One read, "I see your silence as a punishment. I just want a conversation." Another said, "You were too calm, Ryan. That's the part that scared me. Like you've been planning your escape before I even betrayed you." The last one I opened was shorter. "I miss who we used to be. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to believe you still think of me." I didn't reply. I stopped opening them after that. Each envelope felt like a thread tugging at a wound I didn't want to reopen. I kept them in a box under the cot, not out of sentimentality but as a reminder that even silence has weight. Instead, I drew. Not blueprints. Not for clients. Just sketches. Quiet forms. Curved staircases that led to nowhere. Open rooms with high windows and no doors. Structures that were more about feeling than function. One afternoon, I showed a few to Maggie. "These are gentle," she said, flipping through them carefully. "I used to design for other people," I replied. "Now I just draw what I need to see." She smiled at that. We didn't talk about labels. Didn't define what was happening between us. But she started showing up at the shop with iced tea. I started leaving her notes in old books I picked up for her. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was healing. And for the first time, I wasn't chasing anything. Not approval. Not closure. Just the stillness of being in a moment and letting it be enough. That was the beginning of something better. Not a new chapter. A new book. While I rebuilt in silence, the storm I'd left behind was only just beginning to make noise. Joyce's professional reputation had always been polished, nearly untouchable. But when an anonymous complaint landed on her firm's desk, an ethics violation citing undisclosed personal ties to a vendor, the cracks started to show. Apparently, the man she'd met at La Veranda wasn't just some stranger. He was part of a PR contract bid Joyce had helped negotiate, one that later failed due to breached communication protocol. Rumors spread. Colleagues who once hovered near her desk started to keep their distance. She was suspended pending review. I didn't file the complaint, but someone did. I heard about it from Alan, the attorney friend who'd drawn up my separation terms. "She's trying to reach you," he told me. "Says she needs to explain. Wants to talk." I didn't respond. What was there left to say? She had chosen something else, and now that something had turned on her. She sent a formal reconciliation request through her lawyer, claiming emotional distress, asking to meet in a neutral location. She called it closure. I called it a performance. I never appeared. Instead, I focused on the life I was choosing, not the one she dismantled. A year passed. I stayed in Tulsa for a while longer, working at the furniture shop, visiting Maggie, sketching in the quiet hours of the morning. Eventually, I bought a small cabin outside Aspen. A fixer-upper tucked into a hillside with old pine floors and a drafty porch. It needed everything: insulation, plumbing, a new roof. It was perfect. I spent months rebuilding it. Alone, mostly. I learned to listen to the way a beam settles, how the air shifts before snowfall. I learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Maggie visited often, bringing fresh bread and too many blankets. We didn't rush anything. We didn't label it. She'd leave a book behind, I'd carve her a reading bench. It was enough. I started drafting again, freelance work for local craftsmen, designs for garden structures, greenhouses, artist studios. Not for money. For joy. Every morning, I walked the mountain trail behind the cabin. Sometimes with Maggie. Sometimes with only my thoughts. I didn't think of Joyce often. But when I did, I no longer felt rage or sorrow. Just distance. As if she belonged to someone else's story entirely. One dawn, standing at the window with coffee warming my palms, I watched the pale sky turn gold behind the pines. There was no music, no movement. Just light. And I realized I had survived. More than that, I had become whole. Not because I rebuilt what I lost, but because I let it go.